one thing I realized here in the last couple of weeks, that his models and his observations helped me understand the work that I'm doing here, but also helped me understand the structure that we want to build here. He is a prolific writer about political structure, about economic structure. He's just finished editing a book on the nature of crises. And I have a feeling that we're going to get an early glimpse from his insights. We're very privileged to have him talk here. Ladies and gentlemen, Manuel Castells.
Thank you, Martin. I want to So I wanted to thank Martin and also the Occupy London movement for inviting me to be with you here today. I have been participating and analyzing and working with the similar movements in Spain, as you know, in the United States, and this is clearly now picking up as a local global network movement that in a very dire situation in the world represents, in my opinion, the only chance to make people aware of what's going on. What's going on is a system out of control, destroying people's life to save banks. And the only way to stop it is to reinvent in politics because the current political system simply doesn't work. It's dysfunctional for us. It's very functional for others. But I also think that beyond protest and beyond denunciation, we have to deepen our analytical understanding of what's going on. Not because we are going to write doctoral dissertations about the matter, but because we are those who really need to know better. Because when we want to change the world, we need to understand the world, not to stop at understand it, but as a way to change it and to transform it in terms of the interests of the majority of people, of the 99% of people, as they say in the United States. So Martin asked me to reflect with you on the current work I have been doing for already quite a while, actually, since the fall of 2008, as soon as the crisis was open for everybody. I started with a group of friends and colleagues from around the world to proceed with the systematic analysis of the economic crisis that was unfolding. And so this is what I'm going to share with you. It's not published yet, so probably this is the world premiere of the presentation of my analysis of the crisis. Then I will try to leave enough time to at least interact with you in any way we can. Now, of course, it's easier to occupy Barcelona than under the London wind, but well, we are moving far north, so we have to adapt to all climatic and police conditions. So when the crisis, they asked me to give a title, and I thought a cute title was "A Crisis Always Rings Twice," because after the fall of Lehman Brothers in 2008, governments massively intervened. I will come to this in a minute. After a few weeks, a few months, everybody started to say, well, yeah, this is a crisis, but it's a limited crisis, and therefore it's gone, it's already going to be settled, the system is going to be restored, and that's it. And yeah, it's an accident, but we will go back to normal soon. You will be able to borrow, consume, be happy with more cars, more houses, bigger everything. So don't worry, don't worry. Well, here we are again, 3 years later, a much deeper crisis because the crisis has been metamorphosing itself. And the reason for that, this is not a crisis, it's a system. And therefore, unless the roots of the crisis are corrected, it will continue to reproduce in different forms. Why? Because at the root of this, what we are living, and we have been living the last 3 years in most of the world, not in all of the world, but in most of the world, we have a system which is literally unsustainable. Yes, it's capitalism, but saying that it's capitalism doesn't take us very far, because there are many forms of capitalism, and we need to know which are the particular species of capitalism. And this one is what I called some time ago informational financial capitalism, in which everything has been securitized. Everything has been transformed into securities, into value of securities. Everything, I mean, not only your savings, not only the company, not only the actual assets, but time has been privatized and securitized. Futures, options, and options on different times and the different futures. So everything has been securitized and included into a massive global financial market that no one controls. No one controls. It's because it's unregulated, because it goes on its own, and has become what I called years ago an automaton. An automaton that runs people's life. We have created a super robot, and this super robot is controlling everything we do. And therefore, every time we try to do something, say, well, yeah, but the market, you know, the market, we have to worship the market, and we have to do human sacrifices to the market to placate the ire of the market. Who are the market? You know personally any market? And that's my point. My point is that this system has been created. It's a system designed and enacted by people. Not like us, not people like us, but by people. Why? Because the people who first decided were the politicians who deregulated everything and privatized everything and liberalized everything. Yeah, the usual suspects, Thatcher, Reagan, but everybody else. Everybody else. In other words, states, governments privatize themselves to death. That's the critical thing. A new institutional system was created in which everything was left to the markets, and that was a political project, not an economic necessity. Moreover, this system is operated also by people, by what people call bankers, but it's much more complicated. It's financial consultants, it's financial consultants, it's financial analysts, traders, all kind of people populate this wall of the global financial market that control everything in the planet. These people are people who, in addition to the logic of maximizing profit, speculating, etc., they add their personal interests. They work on their quarterly bonuses, and they don't care about what happens afterwards. Take the money and run. And if the company goes belly up, and the financial stock goes belly up, they have billionaire indemnities that allow them to keep going on from one place to another, from one country to another, from one market to another. So, again, these are also people. Moreover, the logic of the global financial market is run by an ideology. The ideology, I call it market fundamentalism, meaning that the market is self-correcting, that the market can do everything by itself, and any attempt to regulate the market goes against some basic nature, which is the market as the most efficient form of economic and social organization. Well, it's simply empirically false. And in fact, it's so empirically false that many years ago, in 2000, with a group of colleagues, some of them very well known, Will Hutton, Tony Giddens, Paul Volcker, George Soros, we published a book in 2000. The title of the book was On the Edge in 2000. in which I wrote a chapter of how information technology and the automation of trading and securitization of everything using powerful mathematical models was creating a system that was unsustainable because it was feeding itself on creating debt, expanding debt. The system works by selling debt and using the debt to create new debts on the basis of splicing securities of the insurance company that were supposed to actually secure the production of this debt. So, at one point, the market did not rectify itself, did not control itself. The market went off control through the process of what now is called the subprime lending, connected mainly to real estate businesses. But this subprime lending is not an accident. It was designed also to maximize the exposure of people who would have to keep repaying and repaying so that the profit of the financial system would increase dramatically. I can give you just one illustrative figure. I'm not going to talk the statistics here today, but just one interesting figure. The paradox, for instance, in the United States, is that this financial crisis and the collapse of the economy took place at the moment of the greatest increase of productivity linked to the new economy and to the information technology revolution in business and in the economy at large. During the period of 1998, 2008, the 10 years before the Lehman Brothers crisis, productivity in the United States grew in cumulative terms at 30%. 30% more productive the economy in these 10 years. But at the same time, the real wages declined by 3% overall, and particularly for college-educated graduates. In the same period, the financial industry increased its share of profits from 20% to 40%. In other words, all the bonuses of productivity went into the financial sector, not into the rest of the created productive economy. And the financial sector used this tremendous level of profits to create more capital, invent more capital, so to the point that today, for €1, dollar, or pound in the world that exists produced in the economy, there are 50 pounds created as virtual capital. The ratio between what we produce and what we trade in the financial market is 1 to 50. It was 1 to 10, 20 years ago. In other words, we have virtualized this capitalist system. It's much more than capital. It's fictitious capital. It's fictitious value. It's virtualized capital, unregulated and fed only by the constant lending and relending, borrowing and borrowing, until the system went out of control. We know the story. If you don't know exactly the details, look for two great movies, Inside Job and Too Big to Fail, which tell you the story much better than any university lecture can tell. By the way, by very good people, very solid people, PhDs from Berkeley, etc., etc. Watch these movies, and the whole story is there. But then, what then happened is that this famous government that should stay away from the markets was immediately called to the rescue and to save the financial system. And I say the financial system, not the banks, because in fact, 80% of the lending is not from the banks, it's from financial institutions. And therefore the system is much more complicated. So governments came to the rescue at the price of trillions of dollars taken from where? From our pockets. That's the point. So we save the banks, okay? God save the Queen, but we save the banks. So after that, what happened, as you know, the simple logic of the process, that as soon as the banks were refloated, the banks are doing okay, thanks, in many countries. Not in all, not in Europe, not in Spain, for instance, and not in England, as the Royal Bank of Scotland, for instance. So after that, credit was immediately curtailed to the real economy, and particularly to small and medium businesses that create about 2/3 of the jobs. And therefore, without credit, companies stop working, stop hiring. Then people suddenly, on the one hand, they lost jobs, they lost wages, and they had to repay the mortgages. In some countries, like in Spain, they simply not only could not pay the mortgage and would lose their homes, but they still have to repay the rest of their life the loan they got. So in the United States, for instance, if you lose, you cannot pay your mortgage, they take away your home. In Spain, they take away your home, but you still have to pay forever, even your funeral. So because of that, there was, from the financial crisis, we went into a crisis of the industry, and from there into a crisis of employment, and therefore, ultimately, governments had to, on the one hand, cover all these new needs that were increasing, on the other hand, assume the debts of the banks, on the other hand, they had less revenue for obvious reasons, because they had people didn't spend, government could not recover taxes, etc., etc. So ultimately, what was a financial crisis metamorphosed itself into an industrial crisis, into an employment crisis, ultimately into a fiscal crisis, meaning government did not have enough money to cover all the obligations they had to assume. That moment is when the financial crisis metamorphosed itself into a new form of crisis, a social crisis, meaning that government stopped social spending to a large extent and tried to save the situation by cutting off public jobs and public services rather than taxing the banks, regulating the banks, taxing the high-income groups, and moreover, stopping what could be the sources of recovering the economy at two levels. In the short term, instead of putting in more money into the economy, taking money out of the economy, cutting spending. Now, it's like someone who is almost dead, then you take out the blood transfusion. You stop the machine of reactivating the person who is trying to fight for life. The key issue now is not so much fiscal balance, the key issue is to reactivate the economy, at least within the capitalist logic. I will come in a second to other forms of logic. Second, everybody agrees that in the midterm, the only way to reactivate the economy, not in terms of spending, cutting spending, stimulus, using public money to, so beyond the debate between neoclassical equilibrium and austerity and stimuli through a neo-Keynesian policy, beyond that, there's a more fundamental thing. Reactivating the economy through innovation, through knowledge economy, through the ability to create new forms of productivity, creating real value. This is directly connected to the knowledge economy, to research, to innovation, to education. What governments are doing are cutting university funding, are undoing education. They are cutting research funding. So, on the one hand, there is an attempt to create a fiscal balance by not spending, therefore not activating the economy in the short term, and cutting off the roots of innovation, productivity, and knowledge development that could reactivate the economy in the midterm. Why? They're not that stupid. Well, they are. Because they think they can get away with all this. Who are they? There is a triangle of power in our societies. A triangle doesn't mean a power elite, doesn't mean a unified elite. It means three particular segments of dominant elites that have a set of interlocking networks which vary, which change but that together close all the other exits. One is the financial system, with actual people who benefit and control the decision-making of letting the markets decide, but with them in the helm of reaping the profits of these movements of the market, first of all. Second, the media, the corporate media, which on the one hand that are owned by the financial networks, and then the media own the politicians. You have some guy around here named Murdoch, no? Some little connection with Cameron and other people, but he had also excellent relationship with Blair. So this is beyond politics. And then third, the political class as a whole. Now, don't let me wrong. Not all parties are the same, but all together defend one particular system. It's called democracy, and it is democracy, but it's a restrained form of democracy, meaning you create rules of the game, you make sure that no one goes out of the rules of the game, and then you negotiate and share power within the political class and within this particular system. And yes, of course, you can vote for other parties, sure, as the Liberal Democrats in Britain, for instance, and I'm not talking about the Revolutionary Party. The rules of the game are determined by those who, at the moment of establishing the rules of the game, have enough power to impose the rules of the game. And therefore, there is one particular interest, which is common, which is shared, which is common. Finish. Let me finish the revolution. So, don't worry. I have been in Paris in May '68. This is not serious. So, this particular form of power is very simple. Politicians rule within the institutions. They make sure the political class as a whole is safe. And then they debate among themselves. The financial system controls economic life, locally and globally. The media system tries to control our minds. And then they relate to each other in different strategies, in different power grids. Sometimes it's very simple. Berlusconi takes over everything until women got him. In other cases, it's more complicated, but ultimately, no one goes out of this triangle of power. So, if you look at the profits of the banks in the last 3 years during the crisis, they have kept increasing dramatically. In some cases, the highest in history. If you look at social spending, has been reduced. If you look at elections, it's very simple. When people are fed up with their government, they elect the other party, which will do the same policies, basically, at this point. We have a very spectacular case in Spain these days. The socialists were voted out because they were doing the right-wing policies all these years, and then people elect the party that is going to do even more of these right-wing policies. So that's what I said in terms of closing the exits. And I will finish with that, one particular expression of the crisis is what's happening in the Eurozone these days, in which the connection between interests of elites and power and what happened in the economy is absolutely clear. The euro as a currency, and I wrote this when the euro was created, can only be sustained under two conditions, as all currencies in history. Either the economies converge towards similar levels of productivity and competitiveness, that's one thing, and then express the same economies, or there is a transfer system between the economies of a very large scale until finally the whole economy converges, meaning that the currency ultimately has to be backed by one state. The euro was not predicated on the possibility of really converging economies. They didn't, productivity levels, competitiveness levels, etc. and no state at that point existed to back up the currency. So who actually equalized the economic conditions throughout the Eurozone? The financial system, the banks. The banks said, look, since you can borrow in euros, don't worry if you are not productive. Don't worry if you are not competitive. We give you the money. You will pay later. Why? Because the banks, as the banks in the United States, as the banks everywhere, always think that they know that the markets fail. They know that the markets don't correct themselves. That's why they need governments. They need our money through governments because they know that if things come to us, they are too big to fail, so they have to be safe. So they know it's no risk. It's actually no risk. This financial capital works for no risk because when the risk comes, instead of failing, they are bailed out by ourselves, except that we don't decide it. So ultimately, the financial arrangements in Europe consisted that governments would take care of different economies by borrowing from German, French, American, British banks. That is a transfer of funds, but not a transfer of public funds, a transfer of private financial capital that was backed by the banks and ultimately by the governments. Which governments? The government that would be able to come to the rescue. Now, why Germany wants is ready to fight to save the euro to the last Greek? Because the most important damage in the European economy would not be to Greece, would be to the German banks. Would be to the German banks. And therefore, moreover, the whole model, this model economy, Germany, growing, being stable, well, it's actually, you know what? It's not the German model, it's a Chinese model. The economic model of Germany is the following. Reducing real wages, 3% in the last 5 years, curtailing social benefits in agreement with the unions that want to preserve their jobs, and working on exports to the Eurozone particularly with a undervalued currency. What does it mean? Well, let's imagine for a moment that what's going to happen in a few weeks had happened before. The euro mark and the euro lira. Huh? Well, Germany, to export to Italy, would have to, its prices would be 30% more. Because the German economy, it would be different currency, it would be a much higher valued currency. And therefore, the exports from Germany to the Eurozone would not be competitive. The opposite is also true. Italian, Spanish, Greek exports, tourists for instance, would be much more competitive. So the country that really needs the euro is not Greece, it's Germany. France thought the same. The Mercosur was an attempt to bring together the interests of the two countries, but suddenly Cossy decided that Merck was taking advantage of him because ultimately the financial markets continue to work. So now the German, the French debt, French public debt, is undervalued now vis-a-vis the German debt. So ultimately, all these differences between euros and different countries, no, it's one country with a so-called real euro, and all the other eurozone are false euros. Come on. So, it's, as you know, it's being openly debated these days in all the countries, including France, to create what they call a two-speed eurozone and a three-speed euro. Well, first of all, the euro doesn't mean the end of the beginning or the end of the European Union. After all, 10 of the 27 are not in the euro. It doesn't mean that there are no problems. Look at Britain. But it means that, for instance, Poland, which is the best performing economy now in Europe, is not in the euro. They want to go into the euro. And that's why, because of the Polish elite wants to be part of that club. But fundamentally, the conditions, both structural and in policy terms, of the unity of the eurozone do not exist anymore. And therefore, you have euros trying to put it in some other currency, yuan, for instance. It is really coming now. We are moving fast toward the disintegration of the eurozone, because as Europe, a eurozone at 2 or 3 levels is not a eurozone by definition. Let's not play with words. And this is unsustainable, because among other things, even if Merkel wants to save the German bank, even if Merkel wants to keep the economic supremacy of Germany over Europe, the German voters, because they have been told that these Greeks and these Spaniards and all these pigs are relegate desirable people, why we have to save them? And since no one has told them the truth, Germans are now blocking any solution. Remember, in one of the most democratic and interesting countries in Europe, Finland, at the last election this year, an unknown party that was unknown before, the True Finns, got 21% of the vote, with only one point in their program: not to help Portugal. Why Portugal? Well, probably they hated Portugal. Not to help Portugal. That was the only point in the program, 21% of the vote. In other words, this famous European citizenry, European solidarity, everybody loving each other, come on. Everybody is at this point trying, in the formal terms, trying to save himself herself. Unless there is something different. Unless these are the kind of people like those who are here. Unless there is another Europe that is being formed. Not the Europe of an unsustainable Europe. Not the Europe of these elites that dance with each other, always trying to remove themselves from the control of their citizens. Referendum for the Greeks to decide? Come on, impossible. It's crazy. Referendum politics these days. Asking the people what to do? Are you irresponsible? People know nothing. We know. They know is how to preserve their interests. This triangle of power. This is not an economic crisis. This is a political crisis. And the political crisis is both in terms of the institutions that cannot manage the system anymore, and it's in terms of the public opinion and the support that they've been generated by occupied movements around Europe and around the world. 73% of the people in Spain support what the movement is saying. And then, yes, they vote for the Conservative Party. Well, that's a schizophrenia, politically speaking. But in terms of the content, of the substance, they support what the movement says. But they would not support a movement party, because that would be against the same game. So what? So what for the future? Well, we don't know. We know one thing. What we have doesn't work. It's dysfunctional. What we have goes directly to a second catastrophe, because the crisis rings twice, but the third time is not a crisis, it's death. Remember the little book. And in that sense, what you are trying to do is simply start at least raising the questions, opening up the public debate, and we'll see what happens. We know we don't want and we cannot go from where we come. As for the future, we have to make it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have some time for